The government sprayed a whole bunch of money out the door without proper guardrails. Government should have prioritized protections for taxpayers. But no, the government messed up. It didn't have the proper guardrails. And now we have this huge mess and this huge amount of misspending that taxpayers are on the hook for.
This is the Canadian Taxpayers Federation podcast. We're dedicated to lower taxes, less waste, more accountable government. I'm Chris Sims here in Alberta. Franco Terrazzano, you're there in Ottawa. And it seems like every single week, unfortunately, Franco, we're hearing about more and more misspending. And the numbers are so big, you can't really wrap your head around them. So this time, the Auditor General released the report on the COVID-19 subsidies. So that's taxpayers' money going out federally during COVID-19. And the feds shelled it out to people through CERB and also to businesses through what was called the wage subsidy by most people. Now, there were some really eye-popping waste and numbers in there. But Franco, let's start with the CERB portion. Okay, we'll do the business later. Start with the CERB. What really jumped out at you?
Yeah, and CERB, again, was the subsidy to the people who were impacted because of the government restrictions that were closing businesses down, right? That was like really the big one at the beginning to individuals. But look, there's some crazy examples of who the government was giving money to. 391 dead people got the CERB. Hundreds of dead people got the CERB. That costs $1.2 million. It's like a little spin on M. Night Shyamalan's The Sixth Sense. Remember the little boy? He's like, I see dead people. Yeah. Well, us Canadian taxpayers, we subsidize dead people, apparently. But let's keep moving, right? Because the government gave 400 people under the age of 15 the CERB. That cost $2.2 million. The government gave 1,500 people who were in jail the CERB.
How do they not know they're in jail? Just stop 1 second. Like, this is the state who has incarcerated them, right? This is the state handing out money.
What's the address? Kingston Penitentiary? Yep, sounds good. Send it out the door. Look, 700 people. The government gave 700 people who were not living in Canada the CERB. That cost $3.3 million. 190,000 people who quit their job. So they didn't lose their job because of COVID. They quit their job. And the government gave them CERB, costing taxpayers $1.6 billion. So with all of this misspending, you know what this shows me? That clearly the government did not have proper guardrails in place to actually protect taxpayers from all this type of misspending.
Okay, I'm laughing, folks, I promise. I'm only laughing because I will literally cry if I don't laugh. So I want to go back to what you said there off the top, though. You said about dead people, taxpayers funding dead people. How many dead people did they give CERB to?
Yeah, so the feds gave the CERB to 391 dead people, 1,500 people in jail, 400 people under the age of 15, 700 people who, didn't live in Canada, and 190,000 people who quit their job and didn't lose it because of COVID.
Okay. That's super frustrating, and they should know better. And it's one of those things where you just shake your head because most of these people are connected to the government in some way. Like I said, they're either dead, so there's been like a registration of their passing. They're in penitentiary, so they know where they are. But what was really overwhelming, I think, and overwhelming is the word, is the overall misspending here. What kind of numbers are we looking at here?
Okay, so $4.6 billion in overpayments. That was made to people who the government actually now knows were ineligible for COVID-19 subsidies. Okay, so $4.6 billion that the government now knows we're ineligible. However, there's at least another $27.4 billion that the Auditor General identified as suspicious payments. So, Chris, we're looking at a total of $32 billion on COVID-19 subsidies that the federal government gave to either ineligible people or in suspicious payments. $32 billion at least.
Okay. That we will get upset in times past over a $1 billion boondoggle. Remember those days? Like now we're in the 30s of billions, but just because we should. Let me play devil's advocate. So the government needed to get the money out the door super fast. Remember, like it was, raining down on us. Everybody was scared. Speed was needed more than thoroughness and carefulness, right? To keep Canadians and our economy afloat because it was being aimed at us really hard and fast, right? Didn't they need to do something?
Okay, so I think people might give the government the benefit of the doubt in like the early days. Week one, month two, maybe even month three.
Yeah, like April to June 2020. Like that's what I mean, for sure.
Sure. Yeah. But some of the spending detailed in the Auditor General's report is May 2022. More than 2 years after the beginning of the pandemic, the wage subsidy for businesses, which we're going to get into a second, it was the most expensive COVID-19 program. Okay, this was the most expensive one. Well, that lasted until October 2021, according to the Auditor General report. Okay, so that's more than a year after the beginning of the pandemic. Also, Chris, we're not talking about like, oh, month one. And we're also not talking about just a drop in the bucket, just a little bit of money, right? We're talking about $32 billion in suspicious or ineligible payments, according to the Auditor General. That's a ton of money. And now, Chris, I can hear you saying, well, what could we get for $32 billion?
I was just about to ask you. I was like about to interrupt and say, what could we be done with otherwise? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So 30 hospitals across
30?
Canada. 30 hospitals could be built across Canada for $32 billion. I mean, this actually might be my favorite one. You could cover all of Saskatchewan's federal tax bills for 3 years. Well, here's another good one, Chris. I mean, you're in Alberta now.
Yeah.
Well, $32 billion, that's more than Alberta's annual healthcare budget. So we're not talking about a drop in the bucket, and we're not talking about just a little bit of spending in the first few weeks that went out of the door a little too fast. We're talking about a whole ton of money that was spent essentially for about 2 years since the beginning of the pandemic.
That is just a shocking amount of money. And I really need to, stress that. Folks, picture in your mind 30 brand new hospitals being built. Picture the bottom line budget for healthcare for the entire province of Alberta gone. Like, we really need to focus on this. And I promise you, because I've been in the game, they're going to trot out something weird and shiny and strange and distracting like real soon. They probably already have, arguably, in Ottawa. Don't let them off the hook. Focus on this money. This is serious money, and they should be held accountable for it. And I hate to rain on the already rainy parade, but you mentioned the wage subsidy too. Yeah. And now that went out to businesses, if I'm not mistaken. Was there some waste there too, or was this mostly CERB? What happened at the business level?
A ton. Yeah, a lot. So the Auditor General identified $15 billion in potential misspending to businesses. So what happened is that there was essentially a revenue requirement. You needed to see a certain dip in revenue, right? Well, the Auditor General says about $15 billion of the COVID-19 subsidies to businesses were questionable whether or not those businesses actually met that revenue reduction requirement. And the Auditor General was able to come to that number looking at sales tax filing data. Okay, so the Auditor General is raising questions about $15 billion worth of these subsidies to businesses. But also remember, even before the Auditor General, there was a lot of suspicious reports. We remember hearing reports of some businesses who were taking the money and then fattening their C-suites, right? Increasing the compensation to executives. Now, look, if it's your own business with your own money, do whatever you want with your executive pay, right? Sure. Who am I to say what your executives deserve with your own money?
Give them a diamond encrusted sink. I don't bloody care.
Sounds like a nice sink. Sounds like a nice sink. That's all I'm going to say. Okay. But look, once you take taxpayers' money, especially during a pandemic, there is no way you should be using that money to fatten your C-suite. No way at all. Okay. Next, this is the one that really infuriates me the most, is that political parties were shoving their snouts further into the taxpayer trough, and they helped themselves to the wage subsidy. Remember, this was a wage subsidy that was given to businesses so that to help them try to keep as many employees on payroll as possible, right, during the height of the pandemic. But political parties helped themselves to about $3.7 million through this wage subsidy. In fact, the Bloc was the only party in the federal House of Commons that did not take the wage subsidy. So kudos there. I mean, Chris, at the end of the day, look, number one, political parties already get special taxpayer treatment with like tax credits. Federally, you got the reimbursements during elections or for the election expenses as well. But look, many people were worried about their livelihoods. Many people were worried that the restaurant down the street was not going to survive. I don't know too many people who lost sleep at night worried that there weren't enough political attack ads.
No kidding. And great point, Franco. I actually forgot about that. That's crazy that the political parties took that money. And to be clear, folks, there's already money set aside for the staffers, as we call them, that work on Parliament Hill. Okay. They work on Parliament Hill with the members of parliament. That's not who we're talking about here. Political parties, the entities themselves, have employees. They have headquarters, right? I can tell you right now, the vast majority of that work is done in an office on a laptop. You can do that, most of that work from almost anywhere. This is not the same thing as a restaurant that has to be forced to be shut down based on government regulation. This is not a hairdresser who is about to lose her shirt because she hasn't had anybody in the chair now for weeks and she can't afford to pay her bills. There's no way that politicians and political parties should have taken a nickel of that money, and they should be paying it back. Now, I'm going to have to take a long walk here because this is super frustrating. What's the fix here? Like, can the government recoup any of this misspent money? Are they going to waste more of it trying to track it back down, like by who knows how? What's the fix here?
Well, first, let's recognize that this is the government's fault. Okay. The government sprayed a whole bunch of money out the door without proper guardrails. And not to mention, this wasn't just during week one, right? The government should have prioritized protections for taxpayers. But no, the government messed up. It didn't have the proper guardrails. And now we have this huge mess and this huge amount of misspending that taxpayers are on the hook for. So it's not fair to ask the taxpayers who took it on the chin, whether it was the person who lost their job or was the restaurant who barely made it through, to pay higher taxes because the government gave a whole bunch of money to people or businesses that shouldn't have got the money. So that money does need to be recouped. But let's make a distinction here, because I'm sure there were many people, and I'm sure there are many businesses who acted in good faith, right? But the government was either it was a complicated process or there weren't proper checks or whatever. But I bet there were people who acted in good faith that the government gave the money to, even though they were ineligible. With the people who acted in good faith, the CRA needs to be as accommodating as possible. And just remember that, like, right now is very tough times for so many people. However, the people or businesses that game the system, the CRA needs to get the money back from them. Yeah. Absolutely. But hold on, Chris. Yeah. What's worse about all of this is that the government's not even learning from its mistakes, okay? Because it's intent on using this good faith attestation process with its new dental and housing subsidies that it's rolling out the door.
Oh, see, this is the thing. They're just going to do the same thing over and over again. And this is where we get back to accountability, folks. It's the same thing with the CTF. We always say we focus on three main things: lower taxes, less waste, and more accountable government. And we end on accountable government because it's the solution to this stuff. No matter what party's in, if they're screwing up this badly, and this is bad, man, $30 billion is really bad. Wasting the amount of money that could build us 30 brand new hospitals or cover the bottom line for a healthcare system in an entire province, really bad. So it's on us right now to hold these folks accountable. So check out the website, go to the Parliament Hill website, look up your member of parliament, write them an email, make a phone call, have the subject say something like Auditor General Report, waste, something like that, and tell them this is your money and they need to clean up their act and you're not going to stand for it anymore. And folks, if you want help on how to write a letter and how to be, effectively angry, but still get your message across, go to our website, taxpayer.com. You can find all sorts of letter writing skills there. You can also go to our shop. We have t-shirts that says scrap the carbon tax. So, right. So you can wear your colors and really push back. We do have a voice here. Franco, thank you so much for letting people know the ugliness of this Auditor General report.